I am Carol Harrison. On a spring morning in the suburbs of Boston, I was savoring my morning coffee while gazing at the flowers in the garden through the window. Even at 62, the morning silence remains my daily source of energy. Grandma, can we go to the park today? Suddenly, my grandson Aiden came running down the stairs. His blue eyes were shining with excitement. Of course, Aiden. But first, we need to have a good breakfast. Aiden is a remarkably intelligent and kind child for his 8 years. Like my son Mark and his wife Sarah, he has a strong intellectual curiosity. As I was preparing to go to the park with Aiden after breakfast, I heard the front door open. Hey, Mark. About Aiden's cram school. Sarah, enough about that. Now is not the time. I could hear Mark and Sarah's voices. They've been going through divorce proceedings recently and are in fierce conflict over Aiden's custody. My heart aches, but I must maintain composure in front of Aiden. Good morning, you two, I called out cheerfully. Oh, good morning, Mom, Sarah hurriedly put on a smile. Mom, thanks for looking after Aiden today, Mark said with a tired expression. The tension between the two was almost palpable. Dad, Mom, I'm going to the park with Grandma. Aiden shouted energetically. Be careful, Aiden, Sarah smiled gently. Have fun, Mark also showed a smile. When we arrived at the park, Aiden immediately ran towards the playground equipment. The spring sunlight made his blonde hair shine. Aiden, don't go too far, I called out as I sat on a bench. Okay, I got it. He turned back and waved. I opened the book I had brought and enjoyed reading while occasionally checking on Aiden. The laughter of other children echoed around us. It was a peaceful Saturday afternoon. Grandma, can you push me on the swing? Aiden came running over. Of course, dear. We played on the swing and then built a castle in the sandbox. We were having so much fun that we lost track of time. I'm a bit thirsty. I'll go buy some juice, so wait here, okay? Okay, got it. While I was heading to the vending machine, Aiden continued playing in the sandbox. It was only a matter of minutes. When I returned, Aiden was no longer in the sandbox. Aiden, where are you? I looked around, but he was nowhere to be seen. My heart started racing. Aiden. I desperately searched the entire park. Other parents helped too, but Aiden couldn't be found. Fear enveloped me. With trembling hands, I took out my cell phone and called Mark. Mark, Aiden. I can't find Aiden anywhere. At that moment, my world began to crumble. When Mark arrived at the park, I was sitting on a bench with my face in my hands. I could hear his footsteps approaching. Mom. Mark's voice had an urgency I'd never heard before. Where's Aiden? I explained the situation through tears. Mark's expression darkened. Have you called the police? Yes, Before I could finish, we heard police sirens. 2 patrol cars arrived at the park entrance, and uniformed officers got out. Are you Mrs. Harrison? One officer approached us. "Please tell us the details of the situation." As we were explaining to the officer, Sarah arrived, out of breath. "Aiden. Where's Aiden?" Her voice was trembling. Mark briefly explained the situation to her. Sarah glanced at me with what seemed like an accusing look for a moment. But that expression quickly vanished, replaced by one of determination. "Let's search. He must be nearby." The police moved swiftly. They searched the park, questioned nearby residents, and checked security cameras. We also split up, calling Aiden's name while searching the entire park. As time passed, the sun began to set. Fatigue was evident on Mark's face, but he continued the search without rest. Sarah, who had been desperately searching at first, gradually began to slow down. "Sarah, are you all right?" When I called out to her, she turned around, looking slightly startled. "Huh? Oh, yes, just a bit tired." At that moment, I noticed a strange light in her eyes. But there was no time to dwell on it. As night fell, the police set up a search headquarters. We answered questions and provided photos of Aiden. One of the investigators approached us. "Mr. and Mrs. Harrison, is there anyone who might hold a grudge against your child?" Mark shook his head. "No, Aiden is loved by everyone. I understand you're going through divorce proceedings. In relation to that..." Sarah suddenly interrupted. "Are you suspecting us?" The officer maintained his composure as he replied, "We need to consider all possibilities." That night, none of us could sleep. Feelings of guilt continued to torment me. I had only taken my eyes off him for a moment. The next day, the search expanded to a wider area. Volunteers joined in, and the town was flooded with Aiden's photos. Mark was moving around tirelessly, but I began to notice subtle changes in Sarah's attitude. "Sarah, shall we search the southern area as well?" When Mark suggested this, Sarah hesitated before answering. "Yes, but I don't think Aiden could have gone that far." I felt uneasy about those words. Sarah's eyes seemed to reflect an emotion other than anxiety. On the third day of the search, there was a new report from the police. We found footage of a suspicious car on a security camera near the park. We're currently tracking that vehicle. This news gave us a glimmer of hope. However, Sarah's reaction was strange. For a moment, she seemed to turn pale. "Sarah, are you okay?" Mark asked worriedly. "Yes, I'm just tired." I silently stared at Sarah. A thought began to grow in my mind that she might be hiding something. 5 years have passed since Aiden disappeared. Time has mercilessly moved on, seasons have changed, and our lives have slowly but surely transformed. Every year on Aiden's birthday, we gather as a family and offer a silent prayer around his photo. This year, he would have turned 13. As I gazed at the photo of his innocent smile on the table, I let out a deep sigh. "Mom, would you like another cup of coffee?" Mark called from the kitchen. "Yes, please." Mark had immersed himself in work. perhaps to distract himself from the grief, or to escape reality. The color of fatigue was always heavy under his eyes, and he rarely smiled anymore. "How are you doing lately, Mark?" I asked carefully. He shrugged. "Same as always. Just work, work, every day." I could sense a hint of resignation behind those words. Meanwhile, Sarah's behavior had been changing, slowly but surely. At first, I thought it was just my imagination, but I began to feel something off about her actions. One day, I noticed Sarah hurriedly trying to leave the house. "Sarah, are you going somewhere?" "Yes, just a quick errand," she answered vaguely and rushed out. These frequent outings had increased. When asked about her destination, she would give evasive answers. Her cell phone usage had also changed. She would go to a corner of the room to talk in a low voice, or suddenly end calls when we approached. Once, I witnessed her hastily hanging up when she saw the name displayed on the screen of her ringing phone. "Sarah, is something worrying you?" One day, I decided to ask her directly. "No, nothing at all," she answered with a forced smile, but her eyes weren't smiling. The most surprising incident happened one evening during dinner. "Hey, why don't we consider moving?" Sarah suddenly brought up. Mark looked at her with a surprised face. "Why so suddenly?" "I just thought it might be good for a change of pace." There seemed to be something behind this suggestion. This house is filled with memories of Aiden. It was hard to believe that Sarah would easily suggest abandoning that. One night, as I sat alone in the living room, I heard Sarah's footsteps coming down the stairs. She was wearing a coat and holding her keys. "Sarah, where are you going so late?" She flinched for a moment. "Oh, just a quick errand. I'll be right back." As I heard the door close, the doubts in my mind grew larger. What was Sarah hiding? And did it have anything to do with Aiden's disappearance? As Sarah's puzzling behavior continued, my days were filled with anxiety and suspicion. 5 years had passed since Aiden's disappearance, and while the light of hope was growing dim, deep in my heart, the belief that he was alive somewhere never faded. One quiet afternoon, I was in the living room using the computer to digitize old family photos. As I worked, immersed in nostalgic memories, suddenly an unfamiliar icon appeared on the screen. "What's this?" Puzzled, I clicked on it, and a video call screen opened. What appeared was the face of a boy with a frightened expression in a dimly lit room. "Aiden." My voice was trembling. The boy on the screen was undoubtedly my grandson who had disappeared from the park that day. After 5 years, traces of adulthood were beginning to show in his childish features. "Grandma." Aiden's voice echoed. "Help me. It's dark and scary here." I gasped. "Aiden, are you really? Where are you?" "I don't know." His voice was shaking. "But Mom is lying. She's the one who locked me up here." At those words, something froze inside me. Sarah had. "What do you mean?" "Sarah." Aiden looked around cautiously before continuing in a low voice. Mom makes me do photo shoots. There are scary people here too. I'm not allowed to go outside. Suddenly, there was a sound of a door opening in the distance. The color drained from Aiden's face. Mom's back. Grandma, help me. But don't tell anyone. With that cry, Aiden hurriedly cut off the call. The screen went dark, and I sat there, dumbfounded. My head was in a whirl of confusion. Aiden was alive. However, his situation was beyond imagination. And the most shocking fact was that Sarah was involved. With trembling hands, I took out my cell phone to call Mark. But I hesitated for a moment. Aiden had said, "Don't tell anyone." But I couldn't leave things as they were. Taking a deep breath, I steeled my resolve. To save Aiden, I needed to act carefully but decisively. I had a gut feeling that this video message would be the turning point that would change everything. After receiving the shocking video message from Aiden, my heart was in turmoil. However, I knew I had to regain my composure. To save Aiden, we needed to act carefully. The next morning, I contacted John Brown, a longtime friend and retired police officer. I knew he would understand this difficult situation and give appropriate advice. "Carol, it's been a while. What's the matter?" John's voice on the phone mixed nostalgia with concern. Taking a deep breath, I told him about the recent developments in Aiden's video message. John listened silently, but I could hear his breathing become a bit ragged. "This is serious. We need to proceed with caution." John's voice became more serious. "First, we need to investigate Sarah's behavior in detail." Following John's advice, I began my own investigation. I started noting Sarah's outing patterns, her phone usage, and the places she had been frequently visiting recently. After a few days of observation, I discovered that Sarah was regularly heading to a warehouse district in the suburbs. So, one day, I decided to follow her. My heart raced as I watched Sarah's car stop in front of an old warehouse. After confirming that she had entered the building, I cautiously approached. Peeking through a window, I could see Sarah talking to someone. I couldn't see who she was talking to, but Sarah's expression wasn't that of the kind mother she usually portrayed. It was cold and calculating. This discovery turned my suspicions into certainty. There was a high possibility that Sarah was hiding Aiden. But why? And did Mark know about this? When I returned home, Mark had just come back from work. Seeing his tired expression, I hesitated, but felt the need to share the truth. "Mark, we need to talk," I carefully began. "What is it, Mom?" He looked at me with a bit of wariness. I told him about Aiden's video message and Sarah's suspicious behavior. I could see Mark's expression gradually changing. "No way. Sarah." Mark's voice mixed disbelief and confusion. "Mom, isn't this some kind of mistake?" "I wish it was," I answered quietly. "But considering Sarah's behavior lately..." Mark collapsed into a chair. "I can't believe it, but if it's true..." Seeing determination color his eyes, I felt a bit relieved. No matter how painful the truth might be, we needed the courage to face it. "Mark, let's get Aiden back together." I placed my hand on his shoulder. Mark slowly nodded. "Yes, we'll find him. And if Sarah really is involved." His words trailed off, but our resolve was set. To rescue Aiden and reveal the truth. That became our mission from that moment on. As Mark and I continued our joint investigation, shocking facts came to light one after another. With John's help, we dug into Sarah's past and discovered that she had been struggling with mental health issues for years. The stress from the divorce proceedings seemed to have triggered a rapid deterioration in her condition. Sarah had been diagnosed with bipolar disorder, Mark said with a shaking voice. But she refused treatment. Analyzing Sarah's behavior patterns confirmed that she was regularly visiting the warehouse in the suburbs. So, we decided to carefully monitor that location. One day, right after Sarah left the warehouse, we got a chance to peek inside. What we saw left us speechless. The walls were covered with countless photos, all of Aiden. However, many of them were taken after Aiden's disappearance. "No way." Mark's face turned pale. Further investigation revealed that Sarah had staged Aiden's kidnapping and had been hiding him. Her diary contained entries detailing her desire for revenge against Mark and a distorted love for Aiden. "Only I can understand Aiden. Mark doesn't deserve to raise him." Such words were scrawled in messy handwriting. We also solved the mystery of how Aiden had managed to contact me. Sarah had given him a tablet for his education. However, escaping her surveillance, Aiden had managed to send me a message asking for help. He remembered me as the only adult he could trust, which is why he reached out to me. "Aiden, he was really alive all this time," Mark said, tears flowing. However, we had no time to dwell on our joy. Aiden was still under Sarah's control, and her mental state was unstable. We needed to rescue him as soon as possible. "We should report this to the police," John said with a stern expression. "But we need to proceed carefully. We don't know what Sarah might do." We nodded. Aiden's safety was the top priority. We prepared to submit all the evidence we had gathered to the police. "Aiden, we're coming soon," I whispered in my heart. "We'll definitely save you." After thorough discussions with the police, the day of the rescue operation arrived. Early in the morning, a police team including a special unit set out for the warehouse. Mark and I were to wait at a location a bit further away. "Mrs. Harrison, Mr. Harrison," the detective in charge called out to us. "Please wait here until we secure the area." As tension mounted, police vehicles approached the warehouse one after another. My heart was pounding fiercely. Suddenly, sirens blared, and police officers rushed into the warehouse all at once. "Police! Don't move!" Right after that voice, a scream echoed. It was Sarah's voice. "Let go! Aiden is my child." A few minutes later, officers emerged from the warehouse. And among them, "Aiden!" Mark cried out. Although he looked thin and his expression was filled with fear, it was undoubtedly our Aiden. He was being carried by an officer, and when he saw us, tears began to flow. Grandma, Dad. We ran over and embraced Aiden. After 5 years apart, we were at a loss for words. Behind us, we could see Sarah being taken away by the police. Her eyes were vacant, as if she didn't understand the reality of the situation. Sarah will undergo a psychiatric evaluation, the detective explained. Legal measures will be taken, considering her condition. Aiden was trembling in our arms. Can we go home now? Yes, everything's all right now, I answered gently. Let's go home. As the ambulance took Aiden to the hospital, Mark and I held his hand the whole time. It felt like we had finally seen light after passing through a long, dark tunnel. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but we vowed to overcome it together as a family. With that promise, we prepared to begin a new chapter. Several months have passed since Aiden's rescue. Following a psychiatric evaluation, Sarah was diagnosed with severe bipolar disorder and sentenced to treatment in a psychiatric hospital rather than prison. Her motive was revealed to be a combination of revenge against Mark and a distorted maternal love that led her to want to possess Aiden exclusively. The trial revealed that Sarah had been raising Aiden as a special child and selling his images on the internet. Aiden explained how he was able to contact me. Sarah had given him a tablet for online learning, but her monitoring wasn't perfect. Aiden remembered me as the only adult he could trust and sent the message when he found an opportunity. Aiden's road to recovery after returning home was challenging. He often woke up from nightmares and was afraid of contact with others. However, Carol and Mark patiently stood by Aiden's side. With the help of professional counseling, he gradually began to regain his daily life. One day, when Aiden showed a small smile, we felt hope. The family bond, though damaged, was surely being repaired. A long journey still lies ahead, but we will overcome it together. For Aiden's future. 1 year after Aiden's rescue, we were celebrating his 14th birthday. The table was set with a homemade cake, and colorful balloons decorated the room. Aiden's eyes, while still holding shadows of past fears, now shone with hope. Grandma, Dad, thank you, Aiden's voice mixed gratitude and strength. Sarah was under strict treatment, never to threaten us again. Aiden was bravely facing his trauma, attending counseling sessions and walking the path to recovery. And on this day, he announced a big decision to us. I want to start volunteering for the foster care system. I want to help kids like me. At those words, Mark and I couldn't help but tear up. Aiden, who had experienced such hardship, was now trying to use that experience to help others. It was proof that he had found true healing. Aiden, we're so proud of you, I hugged my grandson tightly. Our bond, having overcome adversity, had grown even stronger. This was the true victory. As I gazed at Aiden's smile, I thought from the bottom of my heart, our new life begins here. My name is Sarah Miller. I'm 35 years old and work as an accountant. They say life is unpredictable, and that couldn't be truer for my life. 5 years ago, I had a fateful encounter at a local coffee shop. That day, my usual spot was taken, so I reluctantly sat next to a stranger. He struck up a conversation, saying, "The latte here is simply divine." That was the beginning. The man's name was Mark Miller. At 37, he was a successful architect. I was immediately drawn to his gentle nature and intellectual charm. Mark proposed to me by quoting a line from a movie, "You had me at hello." It was as romantic as could be. Our wedding was small but heartwarming. Newlywed life was smooth sailing, with both our careers on track and happiness abounding. Then, in our second year of marriage, we received surprising news. I was pregnant. Mark and I were overcome with joy, tears streaming down our faces. "What a blessing to be given a new life," Mark said excitedly. Though there were anxieties during the pregnancy, Mark's support helped me through it all. Then came the long-awaited day of delivery. The labor pains were more intense than I'd imagined, but the moment Emily was born, it was all worth it. When I held her tiny hand, I vowed to protect her and make her happy. Emily's birth changed our lives dramatically. Nighttime feedings, diaper changes, sleepless nights. But every time we saw Emily's smile, all the fatigue just melted away. "Hey, Mark. Don't Emily's fingers look just like ours?" "They sure do. She'll grow up to be as beautiful as you, no doubt." With such conversations, we gradually shaped our new family dynamic. Emily's growth brought us new joys every day. Her first rollover, her first word, her first steps. Each moment felt like a small miracle, and we carefully recorded every precious milestone. "Sarah, you're an amazing mother," Mark would often say. Those words warmed my heart when I was exhausted. Little did we know that this happy event would soon bring a great trial to our family. 3 months after Emily's birth, my maternity leave was coming to an end. Should I return to work or dedicate myself to childcare? This decision would lead to unforeseen consequences that I couldn't have imagined at the time. I had a strong desire to return to work. I didn't want to give up my career as an accountant, and honestly, we needed my income. Mark's salary alone wouldn't cover the costs of raising Emily. But when I thought about Emily, my heart ached. Was it okay to leave a 3-month-old baby with someone else? Wouldn't she miss me? Such worries kept crossing my mind. After much deliberation, I discussed it with Mark. "Sarah, your work is important. We'll figure it out together," Mark said, giving me a bit of courage. In the end, I decided to return to work. However, I started with part-time, 4 days a week, instead of full-time. Fortunately, my company was understanding and accepted this proposal. But a new problem arose. We needed to find someone to take care of Emily. We couldn't find a daycare that would accept a 3-month-old baby, and hiring a babysitter was too expensive. That's when Mark made a suggestion. "What about asking my mother?" Honestly, I was hesitant at first. I didn't have a particularly close relationship with my mother-in-law, Judith. But with no other options, we decided to ask Judith. She had recently retired and had time on her hands. When we explained the situation over the phone, Judith surprisingly agreed readily. Taking care of my granddaughter. There's nothing that could make me happier, Judith said, which put me a bit at ease. However, I still felt a nagging worry. I wondered if Judith could really take proper care of Emily. Judith arrived at our house a week before I was to return to work. At 62, Judith was petite but exuded an air of authority. Her graying hair was pulled back tightly, and she wore crisply ironed clothes. "Please take care of her, Judith," I said, to which she smiled thinly and replied, "Oh, Sarah. No need for such formalities. Call me Mom." I felt a bit uneasy at her words but decided to comply for the sake of keeping the peace. Judith immediately began inspecting every corner of the house. "This should be done this way, that should be placed there for efficiency," she kept giving instructions. She also had many opinions about our childcare methods. "You're changing diapers wrong, the feeding intervals are off, you're too soft on putting her to sleep." Each of Judith's words chipped away at my confidence. Mark would say, "Mom is experienced, she must be saying these things with good intentions," but to me, it all sounded like criticism. Still, Judith's help was essential for me to return to work. I decided to grit my teeth and bear it. The day before I returned to work, I gave Judith detailed instructions. The location of Emily's favorite stuffed animal, her preferred toys, her habits and preferences. Judith listened silently, but in the end, she said, "Don't worry, I've got this. Leave it to me." That night, I confided my worries to Mark. "Is Judith really okay? Will she take proper care of Emily?" Mark hugged my shoulders and encouraged me, "It'll be fine. Mom can be strict, but she always puts children first. Let's trust her." The next morning, I left the house with heavy steps. Looking back, I saw Judith holding Emily at the entrance. "Have a good day." "Don't worry," Judith said, which reassured me a little. However, I had no idea how the new days ahead would affect our family. After a few weeks of returning to work, I was beginning to understand more about Judith's personality and background. From conversations with Mark and Judith's casual comments, I started to see glimpses of her life story. Judith was born in the 1960s to a strict military father and a stay-at-home mother. She grew up in a rigid household environment. It was a family where suppressing emotional expression and valuing discipline were considered virtues. I realized that this background greatly influenced Judith's childcare approach. She emphasized strict schedules and didn't immediately respond to Emily's cries. "Let her cry. You mustn't spoil her," she would say. Emily also seemed to be struggling with Judith's presence. Usually not shy around people, Emily would often burst into tears in front of Judith. After a few weeks, subtle changes began to appear in Emily's behavior. She used to smile happily when she saw my face in the morning, but recently she had become expressionless. She also cried more at night and had trouble falling asleep. Noticing these changes, I became increasingly anxious and conflicted. Is something wrong with Emily? Is there a problem with Judith's childcare methods? Such questions kept crossing my mind. Even when I consulted Mark, he would only say, "Let's trust Mom." I started to get irritated with Mark for not understanding my concerns. "Mark, something's wrong with Emily. Don't you think there might be a problem with how Judith is raising her? Sarah, Mom is experienced. Don't you think you're just being oversensitive?" As we repeated such conversations, tension began to build in our marriage. One Friday evening, I returned home earlier than usual from work. When I arrived, an eerie silence hung over the house. There was no response when I called out, "Emily." "Judith." Driven by anxiety, I searched the house and heard a faint noise coming from the bedroom. When I opened the door, the sight before me made my blood run cold. Emily was lying in her crib, but her body was tightly wrapped in soft towels. She was screaming, her face bright red. And Judith was sitting on the sofa, watching TV. "What on earth are you doing?" I cried out. Judith, showing no sign of distress, said, "This is the most efficient way. I can rest, and Emily is safe." I immediately picked up Emily and untied the towels binding her. When I checked Emily's body, I found light bruises on her arms and legs. Probably marks from being tied up. "Why would you do such a thing?" I confronted Judith, and she calmly replied, "You're too lenient. Discipline is necessary." At that moment, Emily's body suddenly stiffened, and she began to convulse. Her pupils rolled upward, and her breathing became shallow. "Emily! Emily!" I desperately called my daughter's name. But Emily didn't respond. In a panic, I dialed 911. "It's an emergency. My 3-month-old daughter is having a seizure. Her breathing. While following the operator's instructions, I continued to hold Emily tightly. When we heard the ambulance sirens, Judith was still sitting on the sofa. "You're overreacting, Sarah. This is how we raised children in my day," Judith muttered. Looking at her, I realized she truly didn't understand. The paramedics arrived and quickly put Emily on a stretcher. I got into the ambulance with her, but the fear and anxiety I felt at that moment are indescribable. Watching Emily's tiny body continue to convulse, I headed to the hospital with a prayerful heart. The hospital emergency room was in chaos. Emily was immediately taken to the treatment room, and I waited in the waiting room, trembling with anxiety. Mark arrived 30 minutes later. "Sarah, what's going on?" Mark rushed over, out of breath. I explained the situation through tears. I could see Mark's face contort with anger and fear. An hour later, the doctor came to us. "Mr. and Mrs. Miller, we need to talk," he said, and we were led to a small consultation room. "Your daughter's condition has stabilized," the doctor began. For a moment, I felt relieved, but the doctor's expression remained grave. However, our detailed examination shows the possibility of serious brain damage. The moment I heard those words, I felt my world crumbling. I could feel Mark squeezing my hand tightly, but all other sensations seemed to have gone numb. The doctor continued, "We've also found signs of long-term abuse. Do you have any idea about this?" We were at a loss for words. We hesitated whether to talk about Judith but decided to reveal everything. The doctor listened with a serious expression and said, "We'll need to contact Child Protective Services." Just then, we heard a commotion in the hallway. When we opened the door, we saw Judith surrounded by nurses. "I have the right to see my granddaughter," she was shouting. Glaring at the doctor, Judith cried out, "I've done nothing wrong." When Mark tried to intervene, Judith lashed out, "This happened because you spoil her too much." Security was called, and Judith was removed from the hospital. However, the chaos left deep scars on our hearts. Emily's future, our family bonds, and our marriage, everything was suddenly called into question. Several weeks have passed since Emily was discharged from the hospital. Life at home has been more challenging than we imagined. Emily's condition was completely different from before, requiring daily care and rehabilitation. Mark and I were exhausted every day, juggling work and therapy. One night, after Emily had gone to bed, we sat facing each other in the living room. Fatigue was evident in Mark's eyes. "Sarah, we can't go on like this. We need to make a decision," he began. I agreed. "But what should we do?" I asked, and Mark let out a deep sigh. "In my opinion, we have two options. One is to sue my mother. The other is..." He hesitated. "The other is..." I prompted, and Mark continued painfully, "to try to reconcile as a family." Those words filled me with intense anger. Reconcile? After what she did to our child, that's absolutely impossible. Mark quietly replied, "I know, Sarah. But Mom had her own issues. Considering her upbringing and past traumas." "That's no excuse," I interrupted. "Emily's future has been ruined." Silence fell. After a while, Mark spoke up. "Sarah, our relationship is in danger too. I feel like I can't handle this stress anymore." Those words brought me back to reality. Indeed, over the past few weeks, we had been blaming each other and arguing more often. "So, what should we do?" I asked in a small voice. Mark took my hand. "First, let's get counseling for ourselves. Then, let's make the best decision for Emily. Whether we take legal action or try to reconcile, let's decide together." That night, we talked for a long time. About Emily's future, our family bonds, and our own relationship. By the time the sun rose, we had finally reached a conclusion. We agreed on the point that we must prioritize Emily's future. For that, we must first become strong ourselves. A month after we started counseling, we decided to meet with a lawyer. We felt legal action was necessary to protect Emily's future and prevent similar tragedies. In the lawyer's office, we explained the whole story. The female lawyer listened intently, occasionally taking notes. When we finished explaining, she quietly began to speak. Mr. and Mrs. Miller, this is clearly a serious case of child abuse. Legally, criminal charges are possible." At those words, Mark's face contorted. I held his hand. No matter how painful the decision, we understood it was necessary for Emily. The lawyer continued, "However, since this is also a family matter, I recommend trying mediation first. If that doesn't resolve the issue, we'll move to court proceedings." We looked at each other and nodded. "Let's start with mediation," Mark said. The following week, a family meeting including Judith was scheduled. In a tense atmosphere, Judith appeared with her lawyer. The meeting was extremely difficult. At first, Judith tried to justify her actions, but as she faced the evidence, her attitude gradually changed. "I might have been wrong," Judith muttered, and the room fell silent. After that, it was discussed that Judith would receive professional psychological counseling. Contact with Emily would only be allowed under supervision for the time being. Judith would bear part of Emily's medical expenses and future care costs, and the whole family would participate in regular therapy sessions. We reached an agreement on these points. A legal settlement was reached and approved by the court. However, this was just the beginning. Emily was receiving rehabilitation at the pediatric neurology department 3 times a week. The schedule was hectic, with speech therapy, occupational therapy, and physical therapy. Emily showed gradual progress and slowly began to speak words. Mark and I were busy balancing work and rehabilitation. Fortunately, both our workplaces were understanding and allowed us to work flexible hours. Still, the accumulation of fatigue was unavoidable. Family therapy sessions also continued regularly. At first, the atmosphere was awkward, but as we repeated the sessions, we began to understand each other's feelings better. The change in Judith afterward was also significant. She earnestly engaged in counseling and faced her past. "Now I understand how terrible my actions were," she said tearfully. Mark had a complex expression on his face as he watched her. I myself was struggling with feelings of self-blame. The thought, if only I had noticed earlier, would occasionally overwhelm me. The counselor repeatedly told me, "You are a victim, not a perpetrator," but it took time for me to fully accept those words. My relationship with Mark also deepened through this experience. By acknowledging each other's weaknesses and supporting each other, our bond became stronger than before. We also started participating in a local support group. Interaction with families who had similar experiences was a great encouragement. The thought, "We're not alone," gave us strength. By the time Emily celebrated her 2nd birthday, she was showing recovery beyond the doctor's expectations. There were still many challenges ahead, but it was certain that a ray of hope had appeared. This journey may never end. However, as we move forward step by step, we have rediscovered our strength as a family. Emily's 5th birthday. Colorful balloons dance in the garden, and laughter fills the air. Emily is chatting happily with her friends. Thanks to speech therapy, her words have become fluent. She still has some difficulties, but she moves around controlling her wheelchair by herself. Her eyes are full of intelligence, keenly observing her surroundings. Mark and I reflected on the past few years. It had been a series of challenges, but also filled with many surprises and joys. Judith is also participating in today's celebration. Seeing her, we realize that people can change. We feel relieved to see her interacting carefully but lovingly with her granddaughter. Life is unpredictable, but that's what makes it beautiful. Judith's words resonate in our hearts. Mark's siblings have also joined the celebration as family members. The former conflicts have now turned into strong bonds. Our marital relationship has also deepened through this experience. Overcoming difficulties has strengthened our trust and love for each other. Emily's growth has taught us many things. Despite her disability, she is blossoming with her own unique talents. She has a gift for writing poetry and is skilled at operating computers. We have started volunteering at local support groups, using our experience to help others. By supporting families in similar situations, we found healing for ourselves as well. I'm glad to be part of this family. Emily whispered these words before blowing out her birthday candles. We couldn't help but tear up at her words. Indeed, our life has taken an unexpected turn. But what we've gained through this journey is immeasurable. The strength of family bonds, the power of forgiveness, and the importance of hope. These give us the strength to overcome any difficulty. The future is still uncertain. But now we have a conviction. No matter what challenges await us, this family can overcome them. Believing this, we continue to move forward. Looking at Emily's smile, I quietly made a vow. Let's cherish each